And I don't remember a lot, but I remember a few things like Bob coercing me or convincing me it'd be all right. He took me with his friends. I should start maybe with telling you that Bob didn't like taking me around. I was 27 months younger than he was, and he did not like taking his little brother around, but Mom and Dad insisted that he include me in his group. You know that sibling problem? So we spent a lot of time together, but Bob was always a little bit aloof and always a little bit ornery with me, and I thought, I don't know if I like that guy or not. I remember one instance where he talked me into going over to the Sierra swimming pool. It used to be an outdoor swimming pool. It had a big cinder block, 12-foot high cinder block wall around it. One night at midnight, we wandered around over there, a bunch of his friends and me. I don't know why I was included, but
Because Mom made you.
because Mom made him probably. So we climbed over the pool and went skinny dipping. It was a last minute thing, and we hadn't thought about going swimming, but he took me and helped me over the wall and
At night, it was closed?
It was midnight. It was midnight, and it was closed.
Wait a minute, my son needs to hear this.
Clayton, come here.
Clayton,
Well, we had just moved to Orem not too long, so
Logan.
I probably was in
I
the
want you to hear this story.
6th or 7th grade.
Yeah, in case you guys run out of things to do.
So how old would that be?
6th or 7th grade?
12 or 13.
12, 13.
That's how old Logan is.
Yeah.
7th grade,
Okay.
13.
Yeah.
So we
Listen
climbed
to the
over this
story.
big 12-foot cinder block wall and went into the dressing rooms.
Public pool.
Yeah, it was a big public pool. It was right behind the theater, where there were people. Well, they were probably out of the movie by then too, but we didn't have our suits, so we went skinny dipping. There was about half a dozen of us. We had a ball. I really had a good time. Best time I think I ever had with my big brother. It was. I was scared to death the whole time I was in there.
He was a troublemaker.
Yeah. The other thing I remember, these were not in any particular order, just things I remember as I was trying to think of things about Bob that I enjoyed it or didn't enjoy as a kid. I remember that Dad was sometimes was a little bit ornery and mean with us. Before he became mellow, he was a pretty mean man, and he was a barber. So he had a razor strop about that wide and about 24 inches long.
I should get one of those.
He used to chase us
We have
with.
one in our basement.
And Bob and I finally decided the only way we were going to survive this was to split up. Every time Dad would take, huh? Yeah, we planned it. That was when I was even younger, because when we lived in Salt Lake. But so when Dad would start after, Mom wouldn't do anything to us. She was a grand lady who spoke a lot about her upbringing and was quiet and mellow, and Dad was the disciplined. So she would always say, "You wait till your dad gets home," and we'd wait. And Grandpa or Dad would come home, and he shorty was mean, and he pulled his razor strap. And I don't remember him ever really hitting us with it, but I remember him threatening us with it, and we were scared to death of that thing because it looked kind of wicked. So we'd get about 20 steps ahead of him. He'd start coming after us, and we'd split up and go in two different directions. We knew he couldn't chase us, but at least one of us would escape. But Dad would give up. When we split up, he'd give up. So we had
Pretty well.
worked out really well for us. I do remember a time when Bob got sick and tired of me in particular. We'd just gone to a matinee. It cost us 10 cents to go to a matinee at Sierra Theater. Was coming out, and he had one of his friends who was his age but a little smaller, so he was about my size. And he sicked that kid on me. Decided he's gonna have, and he got that kid to corner me and then start beating up on me. I figured since he was older, he could do it, so I kind of didn't.
Let him.
I just kind of laid down on the grass and let him beat up on me. But pretty soon, I decided this is not fun and this is not what I want to happen. So I started fighting back, and I got the best of him. And I got up on top of him, and I was kind of beating on him, and Bob come up and grabbed hold of me and pulled me off, and held me down while this kid got back on top of me. Those are the kinds of things you do as sibling rivals, I guess.
No, you don't.
Give them any ideas, Dad.
I don't know how many of you, Missy would remember, because she took me over to the Wasatch swimming pool. Used to be a really nice swimming hole, natural warm waters. And now it had been made into a kids museum. But went over there, Bob and I used to go swimming over there almost every day, because we lived on 6th North, just west of 3rd West. Now the freeway entrance goes up that ramp going up on top. So we'd walk over, and in those days we could do that. We could take off as little kids and wander all over the city, or we'd go downtown to a movie, or whatever we wanted to do, and no parents around. You could learn that.
Warm or if it's solid?
This was in Salt Lake.
Okay, yeah, I know.
Wasatch Warm Springs is on there on about 12th North.
She scratches a little bit,
Yeah.
We should.
so be careful.
When you took me to the pool, I
might
don't know
not,
if you
but-
remember, but I asked the lady to show me the old swimming
Just
pool,
look at
the old museum. I mean, when you took me to the museum,
Oh,
I went back in the back, and sure enough, there's a huge, big swimming pool. They had it full of furniture and all kinds of storage items. Still a pool. They hadn't even leveled it off or anything. So things were sitting kind of skewampus as it got deeper and deeper. But it was another thing we had at that area when we lived there was a big old warehouse. I believe it must have been closed because it had cotton bales. You know, these big cotton bales are about 5 feet square and 8 feet long. Huge, tough. We'd break in there and knock off, we'd wander in there. We'd let ourselves in
Delinquent.
through a door that wasn't locked, or we'd unlocked it. We'd go in and play on these cotton bales that were stacked 30 feet in the air. They were all over everywhere, but, I mean, there must have been thousands of those cotton bales. But we'd dig these cotton bales open, make little trails down through the cotton bales. We had a ball, and they didn't ever move them, so that's why we kind of thought maybe they weren't, they were no longer active. But we never did see them move. The whole 2 or 3 years that we lived there, we had the same trails every time we'd go in. We'd kind of like a gang. We'd go in there and play around with each other and kind of fight each other, play.
like Hunger Games.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Then we moved up to Brigham City for a couple of years, and Bob, because he was oldest, Mom and Dad had sent us out to pick fruit, and our money went into a common pool, just like United Order, I guess, and we'd draw from that to buy our school clothes and things like that, but Bob was always the boss. We were kind of like Reva and me. Earl was too young, he wasn't there, but and Bob would go out as a team and hire out to these farmers and go and pick their cherries or pick their strawberries or whatever else they had. And Bob was always the boss, moving ladders around while we picked. And I remember one time I got up on the very top, sitting on the upper rim of a 20-foot ladder, just sitting there picking on a tree, and Bob didn't think I should be looking lazy like that, so he tipped the ladder over. And I remember riding that thing to the ground, cursing on him the whole way.
You still have a big belly of crap.
After we moved, before we moved up there, and we're still in, no, it's after we moved to Orem. We used to go down to,
You went from Salt Lake to Brigham, then to Orem.
and back to Orem, right, we went from Brigham to Orem. Dad kind of followed whatever was available, whatever barber shops opened up. An aside that I hadn't thought about talking about, but the guy who we moved to Orem to work for was a real staunch member of the church, and I didn't know what the inside of a church looked like. In fact, when I was 8 years old, I think we were in Brigham, yeah, we were. And I remember one night, suddenly a little old lady showed up at our doorstep, hauled me into a car, and we drove down to Salt Lake, and I was dipped in the water, and I had no idea what was going on the whole time. But I was baptized in the Salt Lake Temple, underneath the,
Stealth
or
baptism.
tabernacle, yeah, in the tabernacle. But I had no idea what that was, and we still
dig's right
didn't
there.
all the time we
She
were
just
up there.
Carry
But when we got to Salt Lake, this old Mr. Kitchen was his name, said we had to go to church in order for him to be able to work in that shop. That was one of the conditions. I wonder what the politically
She's given
correct
a
people would
wide-
say about that these days. But we did go to church, and Dad got a little bit active and mellowed out, and maybe that and age did it to him. We used to go clubbing carp down to Utah Lake. Now, we lived clear up in Orem, on 4 South, just off State Street, and we would walk down to Utah Lake. Take us all day almost to get down there, or half a day to get down there. We'd go out in the middle of this lake. It was only 4 or 5 feet deep down there, and we'd beat on these carp as big as we were. And so we'd beat them into submission, and we'd haul them up on shore. And the farmers bought them off us for food, for their mink and things like that.
So you didn't have fishing poles?
Hmm?
You didn't have fishing
No, we didn't have fishing poles, we clubbed them. They were swimming in around all through us. I don't know why they didn't take after us.
We're fish.
Walk from Salt Lake to Utah.
No, we lived in Orem at this time.
Or,
We lived up in Orem and we went down to Utah Lake.
We live on 6 South.
And we
it's a couple hours.
all the time would wander from there down into Provo, and we'd wander anywhere we wanted as a
So
group
did
of.
the fish actually
I
chase
always
you
thought it
back?
was
or
supposed
was
to
it-
being a gang as anything else you could think of. But it's just a bunch of kids that took off and the folks didn't know where we'd gone from morning till dark.
And you were always with your brother?
Most of the time I was with my brother, and sometimes we were in opposing groups. I'd be in one group, he'd be in another. I think by design on his case,
It's like the Sharks and
in
the Jets.
his case, it was by design. He didn't want much to do with me at that point in time. Then Bob joined the Guard for a while, and that didn't work out. He didn't like me being his boss.
Oh, this is, you jumped ahead to when you were adults.
Yeah, we were getting older, and I think I joined when I was 18 and a half, so Bob must have been near 20. But anyway, at that point, he got tired of being in the Guard, and I can't really recall, but I believe I sent him on 6 months active duty for disciplinary. And
You were getting back at it?
that didn't set well with him. No, I wasn't getting back at him. He deserved every bit of it. But he joined the Navy in order to get, when he got back, he didn't want anything to do with the Guard. He was
Get
mad
away
at me.
from you.
So he joined the Navy and he spent a good career, a nice time in the Navy, had a good career there. As far, I don't know much about that actually, but he talks a little bit about it, how he enjoyed some of the trips that they went on. Got to go around the world and otherwise he wouldn't be able to see, but other than that, I don't think he liked it that much. I remember, now getting, this is, I'm out of order, but before, no,
Just turned a little
it was
early.
after he got back from the Navy, I believe. We went on Bob bought an old Oldsmobile, one of the early Oldsmobiles that had, what'd they call it? What was their automatic transmission?
Power glide.
Was it Power Glide? I can't remember. One of the first ones ever made, and boy, did that thing howl. And it didn't shift very well, and everything happened.
Wasn't so much
We
gliding.
were on our way back, we'd gone down to,
That had original one.
we'd gone down to Glendale, Utah, for those who are familiar with that, down Highway 89, almost to Orderville. And that's where Grandpa lived, Grandpa Workman, George A. And we'd gone down there and stayed overnight, and Donna was with us, and that was before they was married. And I don't know why I worried about that, but I was absolutely certain nothing was gonna happen, so I kinda kept an eye on them. Even though I was a
You were
little
the
girl.
chaperone?
I was their chaperone.
No wonder he hated you.
But on the way back, this old beat up car, Oldsmobile, was coming into Circleville, which is just south of Richfield, about 50 miles south of Richfield. We had slowed down, Circleville has a name because it's kind of a circle. You have a road that kind of circles around to get into town. And we was coming, this is all before freeway, by the way. You just You go down the road, you go down the highway. Coming in and suddenly, both tires, we was coming along the road, both tires went like that.
That's not good.
It's a darn good thing we had slowed down, because otherwise I think it probably tipped the car. But anyway, it just went that way, and we spent the whole day in Circleville. I believe it was Saturday or Sunday, maybe it even been Sunday. And we finally found a garage there in Circleville, the one and only. That the guy happened to be there, I think, and he decided to show some mercy on us. And so he sent his wife, who was going shopping in Richfield, to pick up a part for him to come back to Circleville so he could fix our car. And we didn't know he'd done that, or I think we'd have probably thumbed a ride into Richfield to get the part ourselves. But his wife went over there and spent the day shopping. Several hours shopping while we were there in Circleville, next to nowhere, waiting for that car. And when he got it back, it only took him 5 minutes to fix it. But it just, it was the most horrible day I think I've ever spent. Bob and Donna there, and he wasn't griping a lot, but I was. On the way back, a little further up the road, we pulled into a rest stop, and we noticed as we came to a stop at the rest stop, this old car of his had 100,000 miles on it. And that was his new car that he had just bought. And so we stayed in this rest stop for half hour and celebrated
To
100,000.
commemorate.
Yeah, we had a commemoration ceremony. Then I remember Bob. At that time, I didn't know if I liked Bob that much. He was a typical sibling
Recurring thing.
problem. But you know, Bob and I have stayed close through the years, and particularly when he was gone, I realized how much I missed him. He was down in California. And then we'd try to go down there and visit him once in a while. He moved around a little bit, and then he finally bought the house where he's there now. And with him and Donna and Bob, I'm sure they had their differences, I'm sure they had their problems just like everybody else does, but to me they were a cohesive team that kind of just made everything work. And they were always so welcoming when we, in fact they would call us or write us and invite us to come down all the time, and it was just wonderful to be able to go to California and be with Uncle Bob. The kids remember it well, I'm sure. And they were as thrilled, I think, with Disneyland and the ocean, and lots of times all they wanted to do is stay there at the house and swim. And Bob and Donna were always gracious enough to get the pool ready when we were coming down. We'd come down the day after Christmas, and stay for a week. And we had a ball while we were there all the time. Bob, as we all know, was a high school math teacher, and we used to have some good conversations about the things that went on. He used to tell me that it was a murder in the high school every week. That was the middle of the area in California, Los Angeles area, where all of the trouble was being started in the late 60s and early 70s, when they started burning colleges all over the United States. Started in Watts, that area where Bob was teaching. It was really a rough thing, but Bob took advantage of that, and he became a unofficial recruiter for BYU, because they had some tremendous ball players, basketball, football players. Maybe this is not a politically correct statement, but all of Watts was black students, and they were terrific. Some of them were the best, considered the best players in America for high school players. So he'd recruit them for BYU, and I think a few of them actually ended up at BYU, but very few, because they didn't like Lavelle would ask them to come up and recruit for him, but they didn't like Provo, didn't want to be here amongst all these Mormon whites. When we go down, Bob, one thing the kids I'm sure will remember, the older kids, was that early on in Disneyland's career, they had tickets that were A through E.
I remember that.
And they took they would put you on better rides. The E tickets would see the big rides, and he ate tickets for the little kiddie rides.
Buy a book of them. Buy a book
And
of
Bob,
them.
being a school teacher, would collect these from his students. He'd take whole student body to the park, and he'd collect these in a great huge bag, plastic bag. And when we'd come to California, he'd dump the plastic bag out in his yard and say, pick up his bedroom there, and he'd say, pick out what you want. And the kids were flabbergasted that they could go on every ride they wanted to, not knowing that lines consumed 90% of your time at Disneyland anyway. But there was no limit how many tickets they could get, because Bob would have thousands of these things.
You don't know how many times we saw Mr. Lincoln.
Yeah, we went to Mr. Lincoln a lot. It was a lot of fun to go to Disneyland because they could do everything they wanted to do. And then they'd organize a family party, and we'd go down to the beach and have a bonfire and cook wieners or marshmallows, and they'd include us in our family as if we were a part of it. And I guess we were, but it was a beautiful thing for us. And then Bob and Donna would organize trips to southern Utah. We'd go to some of the southern Utah places, that, the national parks. I remember a trip particularly to the fish hatchery at Hatch, and they let us wander around on these concrete barriers where the fish are, and thousands of fish. As we all know, Bob was a photographer, and he loved to take pictures, and particularly take pictures of his own family. And if you've seen his house lately, you can tell he has all these huge, big, blown-up pictures of his family. Bob was very proud of his family, and he should have been, because they're great people. And Donna was always there supporting the effort, being gracious, but we always knew where we stood with Donna. She didn't mess around. She didn't let us get away with a whole lot. If we got out of line, Donna would tell us. And a lot of times the kids would just say, I don't want to go to Disneyland. I think today I want to just stay home and swim in the swimming pool. And that too is available to them. And it was sure a lot of fun. Bob, as he got frail, was a great example to me. He's a good example and a prime, in his prime way of enduring to the end. He loved the gospel. He loved a lot everything about the gospel. He believed it. He was extremely proud of his family. Loved the people around him. It's mine, just ignore it. He had a huge love and pride for his family. Nobody could ever do anything better than his family could. In Bob's mind, they were the pinnacle of success. And in most cases, very true. He taught them well. Bob told me when I was down there prior to his death that, and I'm sure he may have mentioned this to many people that were there, that he was ready to go. He felt like he was ready. He wanted to pass beyond the veil and see the people that he knew would be there waiting for him. He believed in all of that type of doctrine that we believe in, eternal life. I remember going to in fact I have a copy of a speech he gave or a talk he gave at Fran's funeral, where he said, this is not a sad occasion, this is a celebration of life. And Fran was Catholic, and Fran had all of her family there to that funeral. It was held in the LDS ward there in Palmdale, but most of the crowd that were there were Catholic and a few friends that Earl had. But Bob really hit hard on the concept of eternal life and salvation and what the responsibilities we have. He kind of talked about other people's faith that grace alone was going to save them. And Bob made a big point to those people that grace was not going to handle the situation unless they did their part in their salvation. Bob, I think, wanted to go on because he was in quite a lot of pain, I suspect. He was on a pain regimen, a painkiller regimen that kept him kind of doped up at the last. But you know, I never did feel like Bob's mind was subsiding at all. He was sharp right to the end. He seemed to recognize, at least when I was around, he recognized me when Karen and Missy and Joel walked in. He knew all of them well. You remember the good times. I think the only thing sad with Bob was that the realization of the end result of what was going to happen. Even though he knew he was dying, he kept up as good a spirit as he could under the circumstances, and he didn't like being a burden on anybody. He wanted to get out from under that burden. He believed in an eternal existence with an eternal family, and I'm sure he's in a much happier place now. I love you, Bob. I think I'd like to see these pictures one more time. Anybody know how to start them?
See if we can do it again.
Well, it took us 40 minutes to figure out what it was.
First